Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 652, releasing June 6 in theaters and video on demand across the US is Barron's Cove, a crime thriller that stars Garrett Hedlund as a grieving father with a history of violence whose investigation into the death of his son kicks up a hornet's nest of corruption. A dark, gritty, and heartbreaking tale of revenge and redemption. Barron's Cove also marks the feature film directorial debut of Evan Ari Kelman. I'm glad to say he joins me now on the podcast. Evan, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you. And I really appreciated that log line. I like how you put that into your own words and that what you described is exactly the movie I hope to make. So I really appreciate that.
Uh, this is a movie, and I was just saying off air just before, really stuck with me. It really did. It's a dark movie, man. It really is, but it's also one that has many profound moments in the film as well. And it's a script that's been with you for a long time. Can you just tell me just the initial kind of conception about the script? Because it revolves around an incredibly tragic moment, which is the death of a child, which, as a parent myself, is something that's not easy to sometimes even think about, or comprehend. So how does it kind of come about for you that that's kind of like the kind of the anchor point for this story, which even though begins with a tragedy, you like to think at the end there's many kind of like uh, lessons learned and some redemption gained from such a dark point in this man's life.
Absolutely. There's a phrase that's sort of coming to me right now. I don't know if it's totally appropriate, but it's something like, the tallest trees have the deepest roots. You know what I mean? And what that means to me is in order for us to, communicate a very high level, inspiring truth, meaningful, important truth, you have to sort of get there through some of the more darker uh you know elements. It is a dark story. It's a dark tunnel, but with a very bright light at the end. That's sort of how I think about it. And I think you have to go through that darker journey, for that lighter space to really be delivered with an emotional impact. So as much as it's a dark film, I've always hoped that this would be, a moving film and an inspiring film more than just a bleak film, let's say. Because this is really a story about, the power of love and forgiveness and sacrifice, more than it is about, anything else. Um, so, and then to answer your question, I think your question was like, what was sort of the inception of the idea?
Mm, yes.
Yeah, it comes from a lot of different pieces that all sort of connect at the same time. There's a lot of themes that are consistent in my work. The last short film I did, Where There's Smoke, was about a firefighter trying to come back to work after being in an accident. And the whole movie was about his relationship with his brothers, so to speak, and his responsibility to them. Is he strong enough? Is he man enough? What does it mean to sort of be ready to kind of be in that environment? And the movie, my first short film at Tribeca Film Festival, Bandito, was about the relationship between brothers, actual brothers, and one trying to, sort of prove to the other that he was, kind of man enough, and these sort of things. So you've got all these themes that are sort of, percolating over here and are looking for ways to kind of express themselves. And then you've got the movies that I loved growing up, that have stayed with me forever, and the types of movies I still continue to love. And I was trying to sort of, figure out what is the through, how do I communicate? What's my feature film? What's my movie? What's the piece of this that I can bring to it? And you start looking everywhere, every story, everything that you see is a spark of inspiration. And sometimes it catches fire and sometimes it doesn't. And I was honestly like scrolling Reddit one day and I saw this story about these kids that were this young boy that was tragically murdered in the UK when by other two kids, in
Mm.
a similar way to this movie. And in real life, the story went a totally different direction. But I was in that space where I was asking that question, well, what if it went differently? What if there was a cover up? What if there was corruption? What if there was something to hide? What if there was a father who had, nothing left to lose after, the only good thing in his life was snuffed out? How far would he go to find out the truth? What if they said it was suicide? What if they said it was his fault? What would he do next? What if he had an uncle who was motivated to try to, also cover it up? How would their relationship be tested? Um, and then you can start to see the relationship, between those stories and the themes that I've been thinking about, for a decade and plus, and you can start to understand how this story became what it is.
Revenge in movies sometimes could be kind of very kind of black and white in the way they kind of play out in the screen, your John Wick style, whatever. The thing that people tend to forget is that when anytime people go down a path like that, it becomes messy business. And it's not about the black and white, it's about the grays that are in between. And that's what something that Baron Cohen kind of brings up with me, the grays that are in between. It's not so simple for this character, Garrett Hedlund plays the character of Caleb. I'm sure he'd wish it could be, but it really isn't. How much is important to stick within the grays, within the in regards to the morals of the story. And not when I say, I'm not saying so much, moral as in good and bad, but more in regards to uh, inspirations, impetuses, and also the cause and effect that kind of like his trajectory kind of creates in this small town that he's from, and the relationship that he has with this young boy who is incredibly complex to say the least throughout the movie.
Yeah, 100%. It's all of my work is playing in this, morally gray canvas. Um, Michael Clayton is one of my favorite films of all time. That entire movie is about living, and breathing in kind of these gray moral complexities. Um, you can't really have a truthful film that is, black and white when it comes to who's right and who's wrong. First of all, it wouldn't be true. Second of all, it'd be, really boring because what is there,
Hmm.
to experience? We're all every day, each of us are, confronted by, you know, choices that we have to make that, that we could, say or do whatever we, a whole range of things. Sometimes people have to make choices or offered choices where they will get what they want, but maybe not in the most honest ways, let's say, and they have to make a decision. Every single person can relate to that conflict, let's say. So that's just the world we live in. It is morally gray, and if you want to, say something truthful, you have to, your story has to be there as well. um People, when it comes to, fiction as well, I like to tell stories where people don't necessarily get what they wanted, but maybe what they needed, or maybe it's what they wanted but not in the way that they expected. Sometimes
Hmm.
there's a cost to what they wanted, and once you start thinking about what that cost is, then again, you're looking at a kind of a morally gray canvas, a morally complex canvas. And also, people do the right things for the wrong reasons, and people do, the wrong things for the right reasons. And that's, again, just the world that we live in. That's what character to me is all about. That's the opportunity that is, inherent to making a film. That's kind of the point.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. Kind of like in what you want to create here. I don't know if like the movies of the 1970s is something that you're kind of tapping into, because to me, Garrett Hedlund seems like a real throwback to a lot of the character actor kind of guys from the 1970s. He could have been a guy who was in Cutter's Way or Night Moves or movies like that, right? He has that kind of persona, has that kind of grittiness to him, and he's great at working within those grays as well. Like his character work is so excellent. Can you talk to me about working with him? Because I just think he's one of the best kind of like unsung kind of leading men that's been working for the last like decade, maybe maybe even a little more now, that I've seen like on screen.
Your instincts here are 100% right. He is one of the greatest character actors working, one of the greatest actors working for a number of reasons. Not only does he have, the highest level talent, possible, but his work ethic is like nothing I've ever seen before or could ever, have guessed was even real. The care and thought and passion that he put into this role and into this film set the standard for all of us, watching how far he would go, you know, on camera. Um, how deeply he would, get into the mindset of the character. Um, it put the entire production, I think, in a very, very specific lane where all of us were just following his lead in a sense. Um, because we wanted to deliver, right by him because he was giving everything that he could and more to us and to this story. It was inspiring to witness. It was inspiring to be a part of. Collaborating with him was, one of the best, creative experiences of my life, probably will be. Um, Especially as a first-time feature director, often for actors working with first-time directors, you have to trust your director, and as a first-time feature director, it takes a lot of trust, and that's true for all of my cast. I'm grateful for them forever, because they're putting their time, they're putting their reputation, they're putting, a lot on the line, let's say, to work with me. And I'm grateful for that forever. But that goes, multiple times, I think, for, the person who's got, who's at the head of the film. And so I'll always be grateful to Garrett for that. He just had such an innate understanding of this character. I barely had to I never felt like I had to explain anything to him. Like from the beginning, it was just building and building. He knew this character so well, and he understood my writing so well, and which as a screenwriter is like breathtaking, when you're watching the take and they're nailing it like as you imagined it, and then some. They understand the beat and they're delivering it even better than you could have imagined it. Oh my gosh, there's something happening, at a higher level because me and this character and me and this actor, me and Garrett maybe never talked about those words or that beat. And yet we have this deep intuitive understanding of like what we're doing here and what we're building. And then you can just get right to that. It's so rewarding. It's better than, look, having the film made and showing it to people, that's great. And I want people to experience it, and getting reception is important, and I'm lucky to have that. But wow, like even if this movie never was made, just to have had that experience of working with Garrett especially, would have been enough.
Other people in the film as well. You got Brittany Snow, Stephen Lang, Hamish Linklater. Trammell Tillman is really having a moment right now with Severance and is in the new Mission Impossible as well. Christian Convery as Ethan. This is a real complex character. It really is. And as a viewer, you're kind of going through a ride with this kid. You really are, because at one end you kind of like you share a lot of the kind of like feelings that the character Caleb has, but then other things come up. Don't want to give away spoilers, but he's a character that's, yeah, it's just gone through a lot of things at such a young age. Getting an actor to portray those kind of swings that this character has to go through. And not only that, but you have to, I think it's really difficult to get in a character like that on side with an audience because of the main kind of sin that kind of hangs over the character's head. Um, Christian does a fantastic job at that. What's it like trying to cast that type of role and finding someone so young who can pull off such complex, mature kind of stuff the way that Christian does in this movie?
It's a nearly impossible task. And honestly, if I were speaking to, screenwriters now trying to make their first film, I mean, this is a monumental challenge that I set for myself that I didn't even really understand at the time. And by the way, that's true across this entire film, right? If you're making a first time feature film, I made it as hard as I possibly could for myself, with the night shoots and the locations and the stunts and the explosions and young actors, which comes with schedule requirements
Mm.
and this and that. Um, but finding a young actor who has the depth and the talent and the intellectual ability to understand this and inhabit this character, you're basically asking for the impossible. Um, I had to see a lot of talent out there, and there were some incredible young actors that I met with. But Christian, stood out from the very beginning. I mean, there's a reason why He's in so many projects, coming out. He's truly, one of the best young actors, working, if not the best. And I remember in one of our very first meetings, talking about the character, the questions that he brought to me honestly blew me away. He is a professional at the highest level, more than what you would expect from the vast majority of adult working actors. He had such precision. He wanted to really get into the weeds of the character. He wanted to talk about the motivation. He wanted to talk about the backstory. He wanted to talk about the beats and why, this and that, and he was drawing all these kinds of connections that even as the writer I hadn't fully put together myself. And I don't know how else to say this. I mean, how do you do that? I think was your question. I think the answer is like you have to get really, really, really lucky to find somebody like Christian to be in your film.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere.
Legacy, if you want to use that word as well. Our total being is defined by the worst thing we could have possibly done as compared to who we really are. It's a great line in the movie. It really is. Where does a line like that come from? Because this screenplay stuff and else was in the blacklist in 2021. You drew a great cast with it. When you have lines like that coming out of you, where does that kind of stuff come from? Do you keep notepad? Does things come to you? Do you keep them on the side to prop up later? How does it all kind of come to you as a creative, as a screenwriter to use in a movie like this?
Great question. Yes, sometimes I think of a line that I like and I write them down, but oftentimes those never make it into any project. You have to be authentic to the story that you want to tell. They come from living in the scene when you're writing it, and being in the state of mind of the character, and being authentic to it has to come from inside the character. It can't be something that's outside that's placed on them. So here you have a character, Ethan, who has, I don't want to spoil anything, but let's say that he's done, something really, 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 really bad, something that's going to weigh on him for the rest of his life. And that's a that's a really authentic question, I think, for him to ask, especially, when he's engaging with somebody else, Caleb, who has, the answer to that question for him is yes, he's defined himself by the worst things that he's done. And he's got this very, narrow, perception of who he is, self-limiting beliefs is sort of what I talk about, this story that he's told himself over and over about like what a bad guy he is. And it's a very natural question, I think, for Ethan to ask him, like, do we have to be the worst thing we've ever done? It's one of the central questions of the film. And I think something that, all of us hopefully, can be inspired by, because the answer is obviously no, and there are people who are weighed down by maybe things that they've done or the stories that they've told themselves about what they've done or the stories they've been told by their parents about who they are, that they're not enough or that they can't do it. I mean, the world is full of messages that are, beating people down and trying to tell them who they are. And this is about, kind of rewriting the stories that we tell ourselves, and recognizing that we have a power in every single moment to sort of be, who we want to be. So I think I answered the question a few different ways. Do I have a second to go on?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
There's a line at the end of the film, and I almost don't want to say it. Um, maybe I won't say it, but suffice it to say, to another way to answer just to repeat myself, you have to be in the scene and you have to be authentic to what the characters would be saying. And if you're writing a story, I think that has some, big questions to ask, then there are natural ways and there are natural moments where those can kind of bleed out.
So for everyone out there, June 6th, Barron's Cove. I highly recommend everyone check out this movie. Watch it in theaters, people. We have to watch independent films in theaters so we can keep independent films in theaters. And I can guarantee people out there you're going to have just a ride with Barron's Cove. And for all you men out there, sneak in a pack of tissues there because you're going to cry some manly tears at the end of this movie. And I got to say, Evan, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. Congratulations with your movie, really, and I hope you best of success with the film's release next week. And when you get that other film out there in the future, I'll just talk to you again. It's been a pleasure.
I look forward to that, Matthew. Thank you for these great questions and for giving me and this film, time to be out there. So thanks.
Interviews and exclusive content.